name is Jason J. Rock Houston, and you're listening to On the Record. And as usual, we're speaking with my good friend Gar Borras, and today we're going to be talking about the David Bowie album, Space Oddity. Welcome to the show again, Gar. How you doing today?
I'm doing good.
Now, just right off the bat, Gar, I got to ask you, I seen you were posting on Facebook a few days ago that August is your favorite month, and we're in the month of August, so what a way to kick it off. And I understand it's your birthday this month. You want to share with us what your birthday is?
It's in a couple of days. It's on August 7th.
Oh, wow. Well, pre-happy birthday to you there.
Well, thank you.
Anyways, like I said, today we're talking about David Bowie's Space Oddity, and I didn't realize...
Actually, it's Ziggy Stardust.
Okay, well, I was doing a little research, and this is an interesting thing about this is... But yeah, we can talk about both, but Space Oddity, though, itself... we'll just kind of get into that first. I didn't realize at first it was released as a single, like in July of 1969. This particular song we're talking about, and it would be added to the second David Bowie solo album, which was originally just called David Bowie, but they renamed it Space Oddity, and this has a little interesting history here. Space Oddity. Was inspired by Stanley Kubrick's 2001 film, and he took it from a title. Obviously, the song is about the launch into space. The character David Bowie was playing here was a fictional astronaut of Major Tom, and it was released in a time when there was great interest in space flight, and oddly enough, when this was originally released as a single in 1969, 5 days later, the Apollo 11 mission launched, and so I just kind of because I originally thought that we were doing this and that it was on Space Oddity, but I got into being interested in finding out it was originally just released as a single, then a couple years later it'd be added to his second solo album. But yes, you're right. We're also talking about the primary topic today is going to be Ziggy Stardust, and I guess the best place to start with you there, Gar. Share with us how you first discovered this Ziggy Stardust.
Well, all of this Space Oddity, Ziggy Stardust, during that time period, which was like the early 70s, which that's when I was really, really young, and it was before I was actually a musician. I was just kind of being drawn to music like a magnet. Everything about it was mesmerizing me, and when I was, I think maybe a junior in high school, and that's in I think 72, 73-ish. I think it's more like 73. I was a junior in high school, and I back in those days there was a lot of backyard parties, and West Covina. My parents lived in West Covina, but then also during that time my parents wound up moving to Hacienda Heights. And so I wound up having friends in both cities because they're kind of close by.
Yeah.
So if nothing was really going on in West Covina, something was going on in Hacienda Heights, and vice versa. So there was always a backyard party to go to. And usually at these backyard parties, there were a lot of bands that would be playing at these backyard parties. And I remember at a backyard party in Hacienda Heights, I saw this band playing in this backyard, and this is really before I was, I was learning how to play bass, but I wasn't anywhere close to performing in front of people. Well, I was kind of getting there, but it was more like it was something I wanted to do. But I'm watching the guys that are doing it, and there was this band, and they were pretty popular in Hacienda Heights, and they had this singer named Randy Jones. who later on went on to play in a band that became pretty popular back in the 80s called Little Tokyo.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's cool name.
And Audie Desbro, who's, the drummer for Great White, was playing with Little Tokyo, and they were a popular band but this is before Little Tokyo, and Randy Jones was singing for that band, and pretty much most of the material that they were doing, if not all of the material, was David Bowie stuff.
Oh, wow.
Because that's what Randy was really into, and they were doing like all of these great songs, by Ziggy Stardust, of course. Suffragette City.
Oh, great stuff, yeah.
Ziggy Stardust and Moon Age Daydream, and so I'm listening, and when you're hearing this stuff being played live, it just kind of, you know what I mean? Anybody that hears the band playing it live, it just grabs you.
Oh yeah. Now I gotta ask you.
Here I am, a young kid, and I'm watching this band, and I'm just getting, Randy was doing such a good job at singing it and everything, and it just, I got sucked in.
and that was so that was your introduction to David Bowie and Ziggy Stardust. Now let me ask you, before we go any further, you've brought up in several of these interviews about the fact that you grew up in an area where Mark Kindle also grew up, and you mentioned the drummer Addis, who also plays with Great White. His name is escaping me, but
Audie Desbro.
Oh, that's it, Audie Desbro. But so did him and Mark, did they grow up together? Do you know, in that same area? Did you guys all know each other?
Well, see, it's so weird because there were so many musicians that lived in that area, and it's just like, it just seemed like it was an ocean of musicians, and LA was an ocean of musicians. But the reality is the world is a lot smaller than you think.
Yeah.
And so I really don't know, because there was I had a period where as a elementary school kid, went to school with Mark and played, sports with him and stuff like that. But then eventually he kind of moved away. And, I lost touch with him. But then later on, back in the 80s, I wound up renting a house in West Covina, and there was this short street, that was the same street that I lived on when I was a kid. But this section of that street was, farther down, and there were 3 bands that, basically lived on that street. There was me living in that house, and then of course I converted my garage into a rehearsal room, and then there was another band that was, across the street called Mutiny.
Wow, I like
and
that.
Then at the very end of the street, up a ways, was Great White.
Wow.
And they had a house, where all the band members lived in that house, and so they lived up at the end of the street. And of course, that was at the time when they were starting to have radio success. Their stuff was being played on the radio, and so they're if they weren't out gigging and touring and all that kind of stuff, they were at that house.
Wow.
So it was it's kind of a small world. But and then Tony Montana.
Oh yeah. Wow, he's a great guy.
Who eventually wound up joining Great White. Was in that other band that was on that short street that was across the street from me called Mutiny.
Oh wow.
He was the guitarist for Mutiny. And so then eventually he wound up being the bass player for Great White.
Yeah, I remember.
During the 80s. Yeah. And I think Tony Montana now is playing, because they split off.
Yeah.
I think
he's still playing with Jack Russell.
Mark is recovering alcoholic.
Yeah.
And so he, kind of wanted to separate himself from the partying and everything like that.
Yeah.
Still wanted to play, but it's pure speculation on my part.
Well,
I have a feeling that's the reason why him and Jack Russell parted ways, is because I think Jack still, was, doing things that Mark wanted to separate himself from.
Yeah.
And I think Tony Montana plays with Jack Russell's Great White.
You're right.
As the guitarist.
You're right. See, Tony...
And Audie Desborough still plays with Mark under Great White.
Yeah. See, it's Great White and Jack Russell's Great White, and I can tell you're right, because I've interviewed Tony a couple times. He's a super nice guy and super talented, because when he was originally playing in Great White, he was a bass player. And now that he plays with Jack Russell, he's the guitar player. But I will tell you, I also urge you to, if you know anything about Tony Montana, he's also got this other band, The Shadow of the Thrill. It's a little bluesy rock project too, but he's like the lead singer and the guitar player, and he does some of the bass on the record. So, super talented guy.
Yeah, well, you should bring up, next time you talk to him, bring up Mutiny.
I will.
That's a long time ago.
Yeah, I will.
That's way back in the early days. I'm sure he'll give it a laugh, because the drummer for that band lived across the street from me, and he was always a really good friend. Me and the drummer were always hanging around.
Wow.
And Tony, way back in the 80s, he was a very, very good guitarist. But when you get a chance to join Great White as the bass player,
who's not going to do that?
Sure, I play bass.
Yeah. And I guess part of the reason he also is a guitar player now in Jack Russell's version of Great White is because they got this other guy in there on bass named Dan McNay that used to play with Ronnie Montrose. So. They got a great cast of characters, and I guess in both bands. But what's that like for you, Gar, to grow up in an area like that? Because another cat you've also talked a lot about is Tracy G, who's a super talented guy that I've interviewed several times over the years, and it must have been kind of a cool thing to grow up with the guy who you knew was super talented like that. And he played on an album of Ronnie James Dio. That had to be, like the dream come true for him,
Well, yeah, but way back when we were all really, really young, Tracy had a huge amount of word of mouth going around about him. And, when I wound up, going over to his house and seeing him play, then I completely understood why.
Yeah.
Because, just the guy was just a monster on the guitar.
Yeah.
And, he's just a really phenomenally good guitar player. But I think what he saw as his originality was the use of pedals and becoming a master at getting things out of pedals that most people aren't able to do.
Yeah.
And so that's part of how he used to get some of these incredible sounds and tones and stuff. And I remember doing a demo, and it was way back in the early 80s. I was playing with this band, and we needed a really good guitarist, and so I told the people that I was playing with at that time, let's I know Tracy, let me give him a call and see if he might want to come down and lay some guitar tracks on our demo and see where that goes.
Oh, wow.
And, so I called Tracy and asked him, and he said, sure. And he came down, and the guy was just a master with the pedals.
Oh wow!
Where he can get sounds with pedals that other people, you know what I mean? They
just can't create.
hit the button, maybe turn the knobs, but he would take pedals and just push them to their limits, and that really became his thing that that really struck me. It's a unique talent that he had.
Yeah, and
over and beyond being such a strong guitar player.
Yeah, the interesting thing about Tracy too is, if you know anything about his story, which you obviously do, like when he first started kind of getting a little bit of fame before he was ever playing with Dio, he was in this band World War III. They kind of had like a Black Sabbath sound, and they had Vinny Appice, the Black Sabbath drummer that Ronnie played with, and also the singer Mandy Lyon. And I think Jimmy Bain, the bass player from Dio, was also part of that. And it's funny because even when he was playing with Dio, Tracy at the time, he had this like beautiful long hair. He looked like kind of a pretty boy. But his look fit what the look was at the time. That '80s rock star look. But it's funny if you look at him now. He's almost he's gone through a metamorphosis. He's he's real skinny back in the day, but that was a look. Now I guess he's also into weightlifting. He's really muscle bound. He shaves his head. But if you were to look at pictures from him back in the day and to what he looks like now, it looks like a totally different person. But that's just part of his metamorphosis, if you will.
Well, we all we all age, and we all wind up looking different over the years. And
no, that's just life.
It's just I just knew him and knew of him well before his where he was touring and having this higher level of success. He was another one of those guys that was playing in backyard bands. Remember him playing in a backyard party band called Riff Raff, and then before that, back in the late '70s, he was playing in a band called Centaur.
Wow!
And
you were there. Wow.
You got to blow off the dust for some of this stuff because this is really going way back.
Yeah. And I got to ask you, like when he came
there was a lot of musicians. I mean, I became very good friends with Tim Gaines from Stryper. And,
wow.
I remember I was over at his house in Arcadia, and he had a speaker cabinet that I wanted, and Tim knew that I wanted that bass cabinet. And so he, I guess he was kind of downsizing some of his equipment. And so he asked me, well, do you have anything you want to trade for the cabinet? And I said, well, all I had was this power amplifier. And I don't, to be honest with you, I don't think he really even cared about that power amplifier that I gave him in exchange for that cabinet. He just did it because he was a really nice guy, and he knew that I really wanted that bass cabinet. And so he did the trade, and that cabinet to this day was the best sounding bass cabinet I ever had in my entire life.
Wow.
It was an Ampeg. It was called an Ampeg V9.
Wow. And
bass cabinet. And everybody knows of the most popular bass cabinet Ampeg ever made was the Ampeg SVT cabinet, which had 8 10-inch speakers in it.
Wow, you got great stories to tell here.
The V9 had 9 10-inch speakers. Wow.
So was this pre-Stryper, or was he in Stryper?
Yes. It was pre-Stryper. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, he was playing in a band called Stormer, which was another really popular band back in the '80s. He very, very popular band.
Yeah, did you ever
in the early '80s.
Did you ever trade bass secrets with Tim?
It wasn't really anything like that, but there was times. One time he called me up when he got the chance to play with Stryper, and he was leaving a band, and he didn't want to leave that band in a lurch.
Wow!
So he called me up and asked me if I wanted to come down and check that other band. Because he was going to wind up leaving that band to go on to join another band. He didn't tell me it was Stryper.
Oh, wow.
But then, boom, right after that, it just turned out that was the band that he was leaving that other band.
Yeah.
And so he asked, he was just the entire time that I ever knew Tim Gaines, he was just a really nice guy.
Wow. That's interesting.
He just, hey, you want to go check out this band? I'm leaving it, but you might want to go check it out. And just things like that. And like the bass cabinet thing.
Yeah.
And,
wow.
He's just a really nice guy.
Wow. So that's interesting. So one of those backyard parties, that was kind of your introduction to David Bowie. Now, I think the one thing we can agree on when we're talking about David Bowie is, you look at the legacy of music the guy left behind, and one thing I think that everybody will strongly, that guy he's got to be one of the top songwriters of all time. Just his gift as a songwriter. Look at the stuff he created.
Well, he's part of that soundtrack to everybody's lives back in the 80s and, even the 70s.
Yeah, Ziggy Stardust itself, okay, this is interesting. I was again, like I said, researching the stuff on Wikipedia, and it was saying Ziggy Stardust is a fictional, androgynous, bisexual rock star. That's who Ziggy Stardust is supposed to be, kind of Bowie's creation. So, like, when he put out the album, it's supposed to be a kind of like this fictional rock star comes down to save Earth, from space or whatever. And that's kind of who Ziggy Stardust is. And interestingly enough, Ziggy Stardust is based on an English singer named Vince Taylor, who I've never heard of, and a Japanese fashion designer, Carousel Yagamoa. But that would make sense because whoever these cats are, Bowie being English, he would probably know who Vince Taylor was. Maybe he was real huge in England, we don't know. But he was also into fashion. If you ever looked at him in pictures and stuff, he was always fashionably dressed.
Well, when you look at, they used to call that glam rock.
Oh, that was kind of the start of glam rock. That was kind of the start of glam rock, yeah.
Yes. And then when you look at the influence that David Bowie had, and then you look at Japanese cartoon, I think they call it anime or something like that.
Anime or something.
Anime.
Yeah.
And when you look at that, you see a similarity in how these characters look, and then you look at David Bowie and you see that correlation.
Yeah.
Between the visual of what David Bowie was looking like during that same time that he was doing Ziggy Stardust. But then, then again, it all ties together, even Space Oddity, because he always had this thing about aliens and space, but tying it into Earth and it's coming out with that movie, The Man That Fell to Earth. It all kind of ties together because you can see that same androgynous in The Man That Fell to Earth. You can see that same whole thing, intertwined with this whole Space Oddity thing. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I don't know if you ever seen the music videos for Space Oddity, but to me, like, I'm looking at it and I thought that was Ziggy Stardust, but that predates that. And I think that the character that he's supposedly playing in that, is called Major Tom. But I think Major Tom obviously predates Ziggy Stardust, but I think that's where he got the idea for Ziggy, because if you look at the Ziggy Stardust, the two almost look identical.
Yeah, and then like earlier you were mentioning the tie-in with being influenced by 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yeah, and it's
so there's always this space kind of thing that's tied into it, an intertwining thing.
Yeah.
But if you notice, the whole story about Ziggy Stardust is that he came to Earth and he became super popular and everything like that.
He ends up,
and then he wound up dying
from his fame.
The rock star style death.
Yeah, and I think that's even like one of the songs he had that was real huge in the '80s was called "Fame." I know Tommy Lee did a cover or something of it, but I think that's part of even though that song came out years later, maybe it was based on the death of Ziggy Stardust. Because the whole concept is Ziggy died from his success, from his fame. It got to be too much, I guess, almost like a Kurt Cobain story.
Well, yeah, because I mean, look at it's just historically with rock, it's had its toll on a lot of great artists.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that had something to do with an influence for David Bowie too, because if you've ever seen that movie, The Man That Fell to Earth, which I did, he winds up drinking himself to death.
Yeah. Very common thread.
An alien that comes to Earth. Basically, it's the story of Ziggy Stardust in a movie form.
Mm-hmm.
But he winds up becoming an alcoholic and drinking himself to death here on Earth.
Wow. Excuse me, but that's one more time. Excuse me. But that's amazing. And the thing is, to me, with Ziggy Stardust, the visual, like you look at him dressed as Ziggy Stardust, he looks like a rock star. And the interesting thing about Ziggy Stardust is like the music Bowie made prior to Ziggy Stardust, the songs are more based around the piano, whereas the stuff on here is more based around the guitar. And when people
it was rock.
think of David Bowie, they don't think of him for his guitar playing. I guess while he can play the guitar, maybe he always wanted to be a guitar player. I don't know, but
because during that time, Bowie's career exploded.
During
the Ziggy Stardust, time period, and that whole thing became so popular. And the two stars of that show was David Bowie and Mick Ronson.
Yeah, of course.
Mick Ronson was the guitarist. He was the guitar god of that early 70s time period.
Oh, yeah.
And he went on to play with other bands like Moth the
Hoople, who we were talking about before,
and other, very, very successful bands. So his time period during Ziggy Stardust was just during that time period.
Yeah.
But Mick Ronson actually had a lot of success in other bands too, besides playing with David Bowie.
And even David Bowie,
during Ziggy Stardust, they were the two rock stars of that show.
Yeah.
And then when David Bowie decided it was time for a change, because when he came out with Aladdin Sane, he was trying to break away from, he knew that there was only a certain amount of shelf life of that.
Yeah.
And David Bowie was always about change in the act.
Which I would imagine.
And for him, he never intended Ziggy Stardust to be the his full career.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of people that were real big fans of David Bowie during that time that were very disappointed or disheartened because he didn't continue on with the Ziggy Stardust thing and the Mick Ronson.
Yeah.
They were kind of that dynamic duo before Steven Tyler and Joe Perry. You see what I mean? Because they later on, Steven Tyler and Joe Perry became that same kind of thing. The two stars of that band.
Yeah.
And how Aerosmith did that for the entire career.
Yeah.
Well, the fans of David Bowie wanted that same thing, that for David Bowie to do the same thing.
Yeah.
but David Bowie, he had so much more different influences. He didn't want to be tied down to one area.
Yeah, it's kind of like if we ever got a Gar Borras solo album, that would sound like with your varied influences. But changes. That's another good example. That song he wrote. That's kind of what that is about.
Yes.
Going through changes. Moving on, and then you could see a guy like Bowie. Okay, he's talking about Mick Ronson. I mean, don't forget there's that Mott the Hoople connection also, where he produced and was involved in the writing, I think, of All the Young Dudes.
Yes.
Yeah, and you could see how Bowie, working with everybody from like Mott the Hoople to Queen. Let's not forget he did that song with Queen. Under Pressure. And that was a great duet between him and Freddie. And you could see. As much as it sounds like a Queen song, you could also feel the Bowie influence in it.
Well, the guy was an incredible talent.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. And I think one of the most impressive tours that I ever saw back in the 80s, I think it was like the late 80s, was David Bowie's Glass Spider tour.
Peter Frampton, right?
If anybody gets a chance to see that in its entirety, the actual show that he was putting on during that time, it was so impressive. He incorporated he was another one of those people that embraced what you really enjoy, which is theatrical rock.
Yeah.
Well, that was a big thing for David Bowie, and he just really took that to the hilt in the Glass Spider tour. The stage, it was so theatrical in how he did it, and he incorporated so many different theatrical things into that. And I remember he also, his lead guitarist and lead backup vocalist during that tour was Peter Frampton.
Yeah, and see, he gave Frampton career like a relaunch. I mean, Peter Frampton.
It was a re-spark of Frampton's career. So it was. If you ever get a chance to see it, I highly recommend it. It was. At the time, there was a lot of people that kind of panned it because they thought it was overblown and kind of pretentious, and you're all full of yourself.
But that's David Bowie. He is pretentious. That's what people love.
It got voted as one of the greatest
tours ever,
theatrical tours of all time.
Yeah. Even I'll tell you another thing about. I was reading about the song. Space Oddity. Okay, after Bowie died, it re-entered the charts like all around the world, and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame named it like one of the top 50 rock songs of all time.
Anybody that hears that song immediately, knows who that is. It's just one of those signature songs. But for me, back in the early days, it was Moon Age Daydream.
Yeah. And I heard
City.
I heard that was
in Detroit.
Now Suffrage,
Rock and Roll Suicide.
Now Suffrage City. Let me tell you I always loved that song. I mean, to me, it's actually I know it's a rock song, but there's almost like a punk element to it.
Genie. Oh my gosh, that song rocked.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's just so much good material that David Bowie was doing back in the early to mid 70s, and that's the time that I discovered him, and it was just one of those wide-eyed kids just going, oh my gosh, I love this stuff.
Yeah, and he's got he's been covered by everybody. I mean, there's another song I really loved he did was Heroes, and that song was covered.
Absolutely love that song.
Let me tell you, that song was covered by Motorhead, of all people, if you can believe it, and is also covered recently by the band Hollywood Vampires. This is like an all-star band Alice Cooper has. and not Alice.
Johnny Depp.
Yeah, not Alice Cooper. They do a version of it, but with Johnny Depp on the lead vocals, and you gotta go on YouTube later and check it out. It's awesome.
I gotta check it out, man.
Yeah.
You know.
And
I mean, this is like the soundtrack of everybody's lives, during those times, and
we think of David Bowie,
and I was one of them.
Yeah, we think of David Bowie, we think of all these great songs, but the thing is, okay, Ziggy Stardust, like we're talking, I mean, he was theatrical, he was the ultimate rock star, and the fact that they describe him as this androgynous bisexual rock star, you have to wonder how much of Ziggy Stardust is based on the life of David Bowie. And what I mean by that is not that it matters, but there's been very much like Freddie Mercury. People struggle or try to figure out, is Bowie gay? Is he straight? Is he bisexual? And he would never really answer people. But not that it matters. But like what I loved about Bowie too is he, like you said, very theatrical. He had a very he's a very flamboyant guy. He was always made up. His hair was spiked or whatever. But not that it even matters. But see, I think Bowie is very much Ziggy Stardust because he was such a rock star, if you know what I mean.
Well, just like they say, there's a lot of truth in comedy.
Yeah.
There's a lot of truth in art.
Yeah.
And, for me, it's, for me, I could care less.
No, I agree with you. Yeah.
But I think what he saw is an opportunity to take that and have it be part of his art.
He ran with it, and from what I've read, Ziggy Stardust was almost like his alter ego.
Yes.
His safety net, I guess. And
even when he went disco, that's kind of when I lost and everything like that.
Yeah.
But he still,
he went back to rock eventually.
He still did a lot of great stuff even during that time period.
Yeah, like I told you, I'm a Kiss fan, and for example, they had that big disco hit, "I Was Made for Loving You." It was really just one song, but a lot of people got turned off. Like you said, oh, Kiss went disco or whatever. It was one song, and Paul Stanley, I've heard him talk over the years, and he's like, well, I just wanted to see if I could write a disco song. And Queen kind of did the same thing, like with another one, "Bites the Dust," and we talked about that, where if you listen to it, people think of that as dance or disco music, but it's almost, if you really break it down, there's a lot of like a kind of I don't know what you want, like funk element to that.
It has that element to it. That actually song was the writer's credits was the bass player
John Deacon. Yeah, we talked about that. Yeah. That was like his number one. He had a number one hit with that, all around the world. I mean, just amazing.
And I think we talked about it before, and that he really drives home the point of greatness in music cannot be measured by how difficult something is to play. Yeah. And so many musicians, and I, in my early years, I was guilty of it too. Yeah. It was all, to me, it was because I was always looking to broaden my horizons and stretch my wings.
Yeah.
But it was all about how difficult it was to play. It was everything that I wanted to throw at myself. I wanted it to be super difficult, but there just became a point where I realized, and that's when I started doing original material, that greatness is not based on how difficult, and you can't judge how good a piece of music is on how difficult it is to play.
Oh, yeah.
Because that bass line is so simple.
Yeah,
it's extremely simple. But virtually has so much catchiness to it.
Yeah, and I'll tell you another thing. See, it gets in your that bass lick gets in your head, and the unique thing about that is, let's think for a minute. How many songs can you think of off the top of your head that are based around the bass rather than the guitar? And probably I can only come up with one other example of that right now, which would be, I'm sure you've heard the song by Creedence Clearwater Revival, "Down on the Corner." Now that's another one of those. If you hear the bass lick shines all the way through. I mean, that bass lick just gets in your head.
Well, and that's, to me, that's the point. It's not about how difficult it is. It's about how good it is.
Yeah.
Whether it's simple to play or whether it's extremely difficult to play, it's all about whether and it's not for the artist to decide. It's for the actual public to decide.
Oh yeah.
Because the public is the ones out there that really decide what is great.
Yeah,
because they eat it up, and they show it by how much they gravitate towards it.
Yeah, and we can't have a conversation about David Bowie without bringing up another song, which I'm sure you've heard of. I'm sure you've seen the video for it and heard it on the radio. But that song he did with Mick Jagger, "Dancing in the Streets."
He did a lot of collaborations with a lot of great musicians, and I to me those collaborations had to be super fun.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, and they were hits, and they stayed part of the soundtrack of our lives. I mean, that was just like a single they released, but it's still. I remember it. I get off every time I hear it on the radio. And David Bowie too is. I mean, not only is he a great songwriter and all-around talent, but when I think of it, I do think of him for his songwriting. Let's be honest, and he's a great singer. But you know what? These songs they stick with you, and that's the thing. He was part of that big British rock invasion, and I know you were influenced by many of those. Next time around, we're going to be talking about the Beatles and who wasn't influenced by them, but a lot of those British rock bands, unlike a lot of us Americans, obviously their big dream was not just to make it in the music business, but their big dream was, I want to make an album. My dream is to take my music to the United States of America, tour around the world. I mean, a lot of these guys, that was their dream. And and they're living it.
And they got to live that dream. But there's a lot of similarities to David Bowie's success to Alice Cooper's success. Because Alice Cooper wound up incorporating a lot of theatrics into his show.
Yeah.
David Bowie wound up doing that. Another part of what made me gravitate towards Alice Cooper was the fact that his songs actually told stories. They weren't just, words and things. No, he was actually telling a little story in the songs, and that's exactly what David Bowie was doing also. His songs had meaning they were little stories to the songs and stuff. So there are a lot of correlations between those two artists, and to what made them successful. But I think, the biggest thing that stands out to me about David Bowie is at that early stages back, when he was doing the Ziggy Stardust thing, he was not just a musician, not just a singer, not just a songwriter, but he was an artist.
Yeah.
And he took the approach to hit what he was doing from an artist's standpoint, just like a painter would look at a white piece of canvas.
Yeah, and say what you will, but I mean, like we were talking, like you just stated, I mean, he was the ultimate rock star. He was everything in the sense that he was not one of those guys that ever got up on stage in just his jeans and t-shirt. he wanted to give the fans a show to remember.
Yes.
And he.
I think he was heavily influenced by the theater.
Oh yeah, no doubt. Yeah, and that's part of growing up on. I think he's from London. I'm not sure, but he's definitely English. But definitely growing up in Britain. A lot of people they that's what they do. They go to theater. So I could see that.
Yeah, and I just loved how he approached it like an artist.
Yeah.
And he would use these different things to give his art different twists.
Yeah.
Different themes, different, and he, his approach to change, eventually later on became kind of the norm.
Yeah, but people didn't know what they were going to get. I mean, he would label like a rock artist, but like you were saying, he did everything from dance and disco, and everything, in between, ballads, rock anthems. He did everything. I mean, I put him right as far as like some of the British pop stars. I put him right up there with another guy. You're influenced by Elton John. I mean,
Yes.
Elton John and David Bowie, neck to neck. They probably just have as many radio hits as each other.
Yeah, Elton John had the luxury of having Bernie Taupin.
Yeah.
Which that guy just had a way with lyrics. But then again, Bernie Taupin's, strength as a songwriter was that he was telling stories.
Yeah,
in his songs.
And Elton was the voice, and it's kind of interesting because, they tried to go their separate ways for a while, but they figured, like a lot of people, they're better together. I mean, as great of a songwriter as Bernie Taupin may be, he seems to work best with Elton John. I don't know if he's ever written for other people, but that's his main gig. Is, let's be honest, look at the chemistry they've had. Look at the success they've had together.
Yeah. That Yellow Brick Road.
Oh yeah.
My gosh, just we could we could keep going on and on and on about like all of these great artists from Great Britain. And it's when you think about it, it's not like this gigantic country.
No.
But yet
had this gigantic pool of talent. Yeah,
turned out such incredible talents.
Yeah. I mean, like I recently got the Beatles. It's called the number ones. Like, and it's basically all their number one singles. But for a band to have like 27 number one singles, I mean, just think about that for a minute, And the Beatles weren't together all that long, but they had that kind of success,
Yeah, there was a time, we'll get into the Beatles on
next
the
week.
next one because, man, I wouldn't want this one to be completely overshadowed.
Yeah, I hear you. But I agree with you. It's interesting that the people from the United States here were influenced greatly by the British rock bands. A lot of those British rock bands, they had the dream of coming to America with their music. They were influenced by the American bands, It's almost
everybody wanted to play in America.
Yeah.
But Great Britain had such a huge influence on American bands.
Yeah. And getting back to Bowie, I was reading in regards to Space Oddity. I told you it re-entered the charts after he died, and it actually was the first time he'd had any kind of success with the single. Because again, it was after he passed. But that song re-entered the charts, and it was the first time Bowie ever had a number one single in France. Which is, think about that, the length of his career, and then he dies, and then the song kind of takes off all around the world. And it's the first time he had a hit of any kind in France. I mean, he didn't do too shabby, but that's kind of one of these interesting trivia tidbits,
Well, I think the thing that stood out to me was the fact that when he was kind of reaching the end, and his body was being ravaged, but yet every day I'm sure it was really hard to get up and hard to, but desire to get up and perform and still be able to go out and do one more tour meant so much to him.
Yeah, see, that's very much like Freddie Mercury, creating music right up to the end, and that, Bowie was the same way. I mean, people, it was as fast as it was announced he was sick with cancer. He kind of passed from it rather fast, but he was also creating music right up to the very end. I mean, that's the ultimate rock warrior,
For musicians, playing music and performing and doing all of that is just so fulfilling. It's an incredible. It's really hard for me to describe to anyone that doesn't do it, and this is really reserved to true musicians, because there's a lot of people, they get up and play guitar and they do it for fun and stuff like that, and it's not it's not as big of a thing for them, and bless them, because everybody has their own things that gives themselves their own fulfillment.
Yeah.
But I can only speak for true musicians, people that have music in their blood. It's something that it doesn't matter how much you're struggling or how much if you're coming down to the end and you're just having to struggle just to get out of bed, you're willing to do it.
Yeah.
You're willing to do it because it gives you this thing that it's extremely hard for me to describe.
Yeah.
But it's something that all true musicians have.
Yeah, it's almost like for a guy that's a great writer like Bowie, it's almost like, you're telling yourself, okay, this record I'm getting ready to put out, this is going to be my final statement. This is, this is what I'm writing about. This is the last piece of, music people are going to hear from me. This is going to be part of, almost like we were talking about, referencing another great British rock band, Queen again. That song they did on the final Queen album, These Are the Days of Our Lives. I've never heard a more prolific song. I mean, he was writing about that. He was saying goodbye to the world, saying goodbye to his fans, letting people, his way of kind of letting folks know, I'm dying, this is my last piece of work.
Yeah. Well, he wasn't even letting his band know that he was sick. But he when they started rehearsing for the for that last tour,
he let them know.
It started becoming obvious to the members of the band,
and he told them
that he was his health was declining.
Yeah.
It was just something that he couldn't hide.
Yeah.
But he wanted to do it so bad. And to me, I can completely relate to that.
Yeah.
I completely understand it, and it just endears me to him even more.
Yeah.
Because as a person that maybe I don't have that kind of success,
but you can relate to it. Yeah.
But I can relate because I come from that same type of DNA.
Yeah. I mean, very much so. Like you said, it got to a point where we could no longer hide it. And I remember first time I saw the video, like, oh, he looks kind of fragile. And a lot of people started, he looks very frail. And then I guess they had no choice but to come out with that. But a lot of people, kind of, if they're an egomaniac of any kind, they would have been like, you know what, I don't want to make a music video looking like this. That's part of the reason I guess they put the makeup on him and stuff. But he did it anyway. He was one of those guys like, hey, this is what's going on. I'm dying. This is who I am. This is me. I look however I look. It's and another great Queen song, The Show Must Go On. I mean, that's kind of that attitude. Well, this is a frail shape I'm in, but I'm going to do it anyways,
Yes, and both of those guys, like I said in that other interview when we were doing it about Queen, Freddie Mercury was the
Ultimate showman. I mean,
best front man
ever
I have ever seen in my entire life.
Yeah.
And I've seen a lot of front men from a lot of iconic bands. And you know, I didn't know it at the time, going to all of these concerts, that I was actually seeing iconic bands that later on we become historic. But Freddie Mercury had that audience in the palm of his hand.
Yeah. And he
had so much control and so much... you could just tell that the guy was born to be doing what he was doing.
Oh, yeah. That's why you could see how Bowie and a guy like Freddie Mercury, you know, could get together and create something like, you know, Under Pressure. I mean, they were both those type of guys, hugely talented, great songwriters. And I always used to hear Freddie talking about, oh, we don't want to do the same thing in Queen. We're always evolving. I mean, you just look at the stuff they've had. Everything from, like we were talking about, you know, the first song I ever heard by Queen that I love to this day is "Keep Yourself Alive." You know, somebody love, Bohemian Rhapsody, "We Are the Champions." You know, another one, "Bites the Dust." You take any one of those songs, they all sound drastically different. I mean, you have the voice is identifiable, but they're all. Yeah, I mean, you could categorize Queen as even something like you know, another one that could be categorized as disco or dance, whatever. But ultimately, they were one of the greatest rock bands ever. But that was the thing about Bowie too. He didn't want to continue sounding the same. And I'll just end on this saying, David Bowie, rest in peace. But I kind of just would like to envision that he's wherever he is in outer space there. Maybe he met his alter ego up in heaven. You know, Ziggy Stardust, him maybe are playing a concert now. Can you imagine?
Well, you know, there's, you know, who knows? You know, that he's in a place that we know nothing about,
and we can only dream about it or imagine.
But I'm just thankful, you know, that I was on this earth
when he was
during a time where I could fully appreciate him and all of these other incredible talents that I listed that were huge influences on me. And you know, I was just extremely lucky to be born and live and become exposed to all of this great diversity in musicians and artists and all of this stuff. And it's just, you know, I look back and all I can see is that I was extremely lucky.
Yeah, and I'll say this. I'll end it on this. Is like we've been talking throughout the interview. Back in the day, you know, especially in the '70s, you always heard them talking about sound and vision. David Bowie was a theatrics. He was a sound. And that's exactly what he was. He had a sound and vision that nobody, I don't think, will ever duplicate.
No. You know, and he will be, hopefully he will be huge influences for beautiful art that's yet to come.
Oh, yeah. Well, Gar Borras, I want to thank you once again taking time to do this with me. We'll do it again next week, but happy birthday in the meantime, and peace out, brother. I'll be talking to you real soon.
Thank you so much, Jason. This is a true honor. Thank you.
Okay, have a great birthday, my friend. Bye-bye.